Good evening, I'm Kate Collins. Welcome to 9 News. We're live outside the Holden plant in Elizabeth. It was 55 years ago that Holden opened this facility and an Aussie legend was born.
Holden, you in my Holden.
Today, this community's been dealt a devastating blow. Thousands of families are tonight wondering where their future lies. The company confirming that by 2017, it's the end of the road for Holden. Tom Richardson begins our extended coverage.
The end of an iconic line.
Today we're announcing that Holden will cease manufacturing in Australia by the end of 2017.
It will cost around 2,900 workers their jobs across the engine and engineering plants in Melbourne and, of course, here in Adelaide.
This will mean the eventual closure of our Elizabeth plant.
The local operation, sustaining more than 1,700 jobs, to shut down by the final quarter of 2017. A long goodbye, but still a shocking blow to workers.
Got 4 years to find another job, haven't I?
Only yesterday, Mike Devereaux was hosing down leaks that GM had already sealed Holden's fate.
There's been no decision made at this point.
But only hours later, he says, the parent company called to confirm producing Commodores and Cruisers in Australia was an unviable proposition.
From 2018, we will become a full importer of vehicles, just like most of our competition.
He wouldn't be drawn on whether any amount of co-investment could have stayed the execution, but at any rate the Abbott administration had already ruled out any new money, despite proclaiming it wanted Holden to stay.
This government had indicated right from the very beginning that we wanted Holden to remain manufacturing cars in Australia.
This really isn't about anything other than the country has some very difficult decisions to make, as does the government of the day. And I understand their point of view, I do.
Holden officially blaming a strong currency and adverse economic conditions. But the manufacturing union has no doubts about who it blames for the decision.
Tony Abbott will be recognised as the Prime Minister that closed the automotive industry down in Australia.
The timing of the decision took even the union by surprise. John Camillo is in Japan for an auto conference after receiving private assurances no announcement was planned. He now hopes the state government can find a plan B.
We need to really work now for the next couple of years to make sure these people are trained, educated to work elsewhere, and they're not left on the scrap heap.
As for Holden, it says it will still be a part of the Australian auto landscape, selling imports and providing maintenance. Local traders hoping sales can sustain the likely backlash.
I would hope not. I would hope that people would see that supporting Holden is important because a lot of people are employed in our industry in particular, in our Holden dealer network, and we want that to continue for obvious reasons.
Holden follows Ford in exiting Australia. Industry analysts believe it's only a matter of time before Toyota follows suit. Tom Richardson, 9 News.
Well, the workers here are of course simply devastated, many convinced they won't be able to find a new job in a part of Adelaide where unemployment is already well above average. Locals also concerned about the spin-off effects on retailers and service providers across the northern suburbs.
Many too angry for words, some in tears. The axe they knew was hovering fell with an ironic surprise.
We knew this was going to come, but we didn't think it would come that quick. And now that it has come, there are a lot of people hurting over it.
What can my feelings be? It's over.
They looked lost at a place that for so long felt like home. Among those who gathered after the announcement were workers who'd only just arrived for their shift. Leon Wachowski is a 35-year veteran.
I'm like 53 now, so I'll be like say 57, 56. I'll struggle to get work. I want, and I've got a mortgage again now, and there's the young ones too, and and this area is going to be stuffed.
When you have such a major employer close their doors, then there will be spill-on effects throughout the community, and the northern suburbs does have a higher than average unemployment rate already.
The local council will now be part of a massive effort over the next 4 years to help workers here and their families, as well as the wider community, to regroup.
I think the most immediate concern is obviously our community getting behind those workers and obviously helping them get through this news.
But for workers like Leon, the veteran son of a veteran father...
Well, my dad, he worked there. He worked there for 31 years.
Laying the blame provides no comfort.
What would you say to Mike Devereaux?
Good luck to him in his new position. He's got a job, but I won't have one. I think these politicians, not only the Labor and the Liberal, they got a hell of a lot to answer for, because this country has been destroyed by them.
I'm disappointed that in this country, we're a resource-rich country, and we're in this situation now. And manufacturing is just going out the door. So yeah, I'm upset about it.
This is just one of many companies that will suffer. Intercast and Forge at Wingfield will probably lose half its workforce when Holden closes. The Premier was there today just 2 hours before Holden's announcement, making what turned out to be a futile rallying call.
We are campaigning. We're fighting for our lives. We're fighting for jobs in South Australia.
Eddie Godfrey, 9 News.
We cross live now to Premier Jay Weatherill, who's just convened an emergency cabinet meeting at State Admin. And Premier, has the Prime Minister Tony Abbott let South Australia and the country down?
Yes, the Liberals have got what they wanted. They've forced Holdens out of this country. With their $500 million cut, with their hostility that they've directed to this company, it was inevitable that closure would soon follow.
Now, your government promised money for Holden but never signed off on that. Should have you done more?
We have been fighting every inch of the way for South Australian jobs for these workers, and we're going to continue to fight along their side to make sure that they have a smooth transition into another job, and we're going to make Tony Abbott pay the price for this decision, both politically and financially. We're going to need to restructure the South Australian economy, and he is going to make a massive contribution to assist us to do that.
And what's the plan now for those that have received the news today? How's the government going to be helping them?
Well, I've spoken to Mike Devereaux just a few moments ago. I've inquired as to the well-being of those workers. It's very important that the workers that have heard the news tonight, that are going home to their families, that they're carefully monitored. This is a devastating time for them and their families in the lead up to Christmas, and we'll be working very closely to ensure they receive all the support that they deserve. Premier
Jay Weatherill, thank you for your time. Well, while today's decision ends a month of intense speculation, it hasn't always been a rocky road for Holden. The company formed the backbone of manufacturing and quickly became a favourite icon both here and across the country.
The Australian government had issued the challenge to make an Australian car. GMH accepted the challenge.
And so it all began, the development of an Australian car that would become a symbol of the nation. In 1958, construction begins on a factory at Elizabeth. 5 years later, a famous visit from the Queen before its first fully made car rolls off the production line.
Drawing and trimming until the outer shell of the door emerges, made to the designer's specifications.
The factory becomes the heart of Australia's largest residential development in the country.
Elizabeth, an all-new city.
It was a jobs bonanza as vehicle after vehicle was unveiled. But by 2005, the glory days were over for the entire Australian car industry.
Mitsubishi Motors will pursue a full import strategy, business strategy in Australia.
And the nation's most iconic car brand was not immune.
Dejected workers emerge. Staggered by the news, their jobs are in jeopardy.
Oh, at 63 years, I think I'm a bit long in the tooth to go hunting around for another job. No, I don't want to go anywhere. No.
In 2009, Holden slashed production, 3,000 employees effectively working half-time.
The good news is we have no job losses here, and we're trying to really stabilise our production.
But it would only be a matter of time.
It was very terrible. A lot of people were wiping some tears out of their eyes.
180 jobs went in 2012. In April of this year, another 400.
And I have to tell you, that guts me, because those 400 people have done everything that we have asked them to do.
The chief executive could only put on a brave face for so long as reality sank in and the truth finally came out.
Good afternoon, everybody.
5 years ago, on the 50th anniversary of the plant, a time capsule was buried there. Filled with Holden history, it was to be reopened in 2033. But sadly, by then, the factory will have been closed for 16 years. Ben Avery, 9 News.
The Abbott government has been slammed today, deemed the government that killed the country's automotive industry. Opposition leader Stephen Marshall joins me now live. Thank you for your time this evening. Clearly you didn't do enough or did nothing to convince your federal counterpart Tony Abbott to save Holden.
Well, look, Kate, that's just not the case. We worked very hard with our coalition colleagues, but quite frankly, as GM pointed out, as Mike Devereaux pointed out, there was no deal to be done. Everybody worked as hard as they could. Nobody is to blame. It's not the government's fault, it's not the workers' fault, it's not GM's fault. Quite frankly, the business case just didn't stack up here in Adelaide.
So how can the federal and state Liberals then justify to the thousands of Holden employees that have just lost their jobs that their jobs weren't worth saving?
Well, look, they certainly were worth saving, but GM made a decision. They made that decision in Detroit. Look, quite frankly, Mike Devereaux went through this in his press conference. What he said was that we had the perfect storm here in Australia. We had a high currency, we had a small domestic market which was highly fragmented. We just didn't have the economies of scale here. 80,000 vehicles in Australia versus some of their other plants in Southeast Asia and China in excess of 4 million. So there's real economies of scale there. Everybody tried everything they could. Mike Devereaux worked as passionately as he could to save the jobs there. There just wasn't a deal to be done.
So what would your message be to those workers tonight on behalf of the Liberals?
Well, look, it's a very sad day for everybody at Holden, but also everybody right across the auto sector here in South Australia. What we need to do now is not play politics, but come up with a plan to get South Australia's manufacturing and South Australian jobs back on track. We've lost 33,000 jobs in South Australia since the budget came down in June. Everybody, both sides of politics, need to be working together to come up with a plan to create South Australian jobs. Opposition
Leader Stephen Marshall, thank you for your time. Well, some workers have already bitten the bullet and started expanding their skills. One such worker is Holden veteran of 11 years, Stuart Crozier, who started a tool-making apprenticeship. We spoke to him a short time ago.
Not the best timing. We knew something was going to happen, but to happen right before Christmas it's not the best.
How were the workers told today, Stuart? How did it happen?
We were called to a snap meeting on the canteen lawn, and yeah. Well, they just told us that they were shutting down and gave us the reasons why and said thanks very much and you could go home now.
You know, you're looking after the family here every day. What does it mean to you?
Oh, there's no safety net now. It's just everything's up in the air, everything's unpredictable. We have no stable income once he finishes up at Holden's, because I just do a part-time job. So yeah, he's our main income, and we have mortgage, we have the 2 kids at school, we've got bills like everybody else. Just not sure how we're going to pay for it.
That's the biggest thing. How do I pay for the mortgage? Kids' sport, food on the table for them, bills. It was good job security. Now there's not many good jobs out there that are full time and can offer the security that I thought Holden's could offer.
Well, the Holden announcement caused uproar in Canberra today. The federal government says it will do all it can to help the affected workers.
Prime Minister
Warren Truss spoke to the Holden boss just before 2 o'clock and confirmed the worst to Parliament.
This is a difficult day for Australians, a difficult day particularly for the Holden employees.
Joe Hockey says they'll do everything to help the 2,900 workers directly affected. But the Holden decision sparked finger-pointing, the blame game and uproar.
The member, you name me. The member will notify the chair. You will remove himself forthwith.
Hasn't the government got exactly what it wanted, and won't Australia's workers pay for their failure?
Where was that outrage from Labor? What a surprise. And Ford left and Mitsubishi left and Labor wasn't too outraged then. If money were the issue, why Holden is leaving Australia, then why did Ford leave and Mitsubishi leave whilst Labor was in government?
South Australian Senator Nick Xenophon warned tens of thousands of jobs will go.
This will be like an economic tsunami through the entire nation.
And in Melbourne, union tears and anger.
My heart, my heart goes out to those workers and their families. My view is they've been betrayed by Tony Abbott.
14 days till Christmas and a message no one wanted.
We hate the fact that Australians are losing jobs.
It's a shocking day for Holden workers. It's also a terrifying day for other auto industry workers. We're talking about probably 200,000 jobs.
Holden wouldn't say if more funds would have made a difference, but having made it clear there'd be no extra money, Tony Abbott arrives home tonight, having to limit the damage that could have economic and political implications all the way to the next election. Lane Calcutt, 9 News.
And we cross live now to Lane Calcutt at Parliament House in Canberra. Lane, how does the Holden decision reflect on the Abbott government?
Well, Kate, it's clearly a big test for the Abbott government. On the one hand, the decision removes a large slice of government funds from the car industry, putting it on a more economic rationalist footing. But as I said in my story just then, the Prime Minister has to limit the damage. After all, governments get the blame for job losses. So there'll need to be reskilling of the workforce. And that begins in crisis talks tonight when Tony Abbott meets key ministers after arriving back in Canberra. And of course, it'll continue tomorrow when the Prime Minister meets your Premier, Jay Weatherill, here in Canberra, Kate.
And we'll all be watching. Thank you very much, Lane. I'm joined live now by state political reporter Tom Richardson. And Tom, you've been following this story from the beginning. Do you think this decision was unexpected?
Sadly not unexpected, Kate. Of course, the writing's really been on the wall for Holden ever since Ford announced its closure earlier this year. They made it very clear at the time that they would need a bigger quantum of co-investment funding from the federal government, and they've been negotiating along those lines. Obviously, there was a sort of a stay of execution during the federal election, but it's certainly been very much the writing on the wall since that time. I suppose what has been then surprising about today's announcement was the timing. It was widely expected that they wouldn't want the costs associated with a shutdown on the final quarter balance sheet for this year. And of course also there's an interim report from a Productivity Commission inquiry into the auto industry due next Friday, a final report due in March. So it was much more keenly expected in the first quarter of next year. But I suppose the best that can be said about the timing is that workers now know their fate, but it's certainly going to make for a very bleak Christmas for thousands of South Australians, Kate.
It sure will. Thank you, Tom.